Once you've downloaded your belt file, you'll want to add it to a folder in your library. This video is just going to cover how to work with the ZPRJ file, not the OBJ. You're going to right-click on your ZPRJ and choose Add to Workspace. You should have the garment file open that you want to add the belt to. So make sure that you only have garment selected here and not avatar, and your translation should be 000. Remember that you always want to maintain the current size of your avatar when you add something to your workspace. You could start with your belt file and then add your garment underneath the belt, but I just find it easier to layer the way that you would layer something in real life. When you add something to your workspace, it already comes in selected, and you want to move it out of the way so that it's easy to marquee over each individual garment or accessory. My pant here has belt loops, as you can see. So I'm going to start by selecting my entire pant, but deselecting the belt loops, and I'm going to freeze my pant. I'm going to select my belt and use my gizmo in 3D to arrange it where it should be on the waistband and within the belt loops. So this front bit of this particular belt has this looped detail. So I'm going to recommend that instead of keeping it nice at the back, you pull it forward a bit more so that the loop detail doesn't interact with the pant fly as much. So I just have a tiny bit coming through, but for the most part, my loop detail is unaffected. Even if that means that you slide it forward enough where the back is kind of colliding a little bit, that's better than affecting your belt loop. Now I'll select all my belt loops and deactivate them. Remember, with right-clicking in 3D, sometimes the easiest thing is to right-click on the yellow box of your gizmo. Sometimes with a pant that has a button, you might run into some collision issues. I actually didn't have any problems on this one, but I want to show you what to do to avoid any issues. You can grab your Select Move Button tool, and you have two options. One is if you'll never see the button, if you want to just remove it, you can just delete it. And you can just draw a little internal line on either side of your waistband where the button is and sew them together. The other option is just to select your button, and in the property editor here, you want to uncheck collision. This will just keep the button from reacting to other things like your garment fabric or your belt. So it'll avoid any collision issues. So you can try either of these methods, or you can just wait and see if you have any problems before you apply them. To start layering your belt, you want to select the pattern and in the property editor change to layer 1. IDES accessories come in high res, but if your particle distance is higher than 5, you should change it to 5. You don't need to put your whole garment in high res, but you will want to make sure that your waistband and belt loop pieces are in a low particle distance. Now you can simulate, and the belt should come to the top because it's set to layer 1. So make sure you rotate around and see that all of the green has come out of the rest of your garment. I can see that during simulation my belt has slid up just a tiny bit, and so I need to reselect the pattern. I'm just tapping my 2 key to get front and center, and then I use my gizmo to slide it down within the belt loops. And then I'll simulate again just to make sure that it stays there. Once it's sitting properly, you should select your belt again and set it back to layer 0. Now I'm going to select all of my belt loops again and activate them. Then I select each belt loop individually and use my gizmo to pull it out. I use the local coordinate gizmo, so I need to be sure that I'm looking at it straight on, and then I pull my blue line to bring it toward me. You'll see the belt loops on my pants are done like real life, where they're inserted into the waistband. So now I need to use my Select Mesh tool to actually push that bottom bit of the belt loop in underneath my belt. If you don't have this problem, don't worry about it. But if you do, I use my Select Mesh to grab the tail. I hit Shift A to hide my avatar, and I just want to go just a tiny bit behind the belt without going into the pant. Because all of my belt loops are activated, I'm not going to simulate just yet. I'm going to go around and do this to every one of my belt loops first, including the bottom bit that I just showed you. If you want, you could freeze your belt, but it's not really necessary. And you don't need to layer the belt loops because we've already layered them properly in the air. So CLO will recognize them as being outside of the belt. Now you can unfreeze your pant. IDES accessories like this one should be looped properly so that you can easily simulate and layer without any issues. But if for any reason you do have issues, I want to show you some tips. With the pin box tool, you can freeze just that one part of the belt. So in this case, it's easiest to marquee in 3D, so you can kind of find out where on the belt you need to pin. But you can see that puts unwanted pins on your pant. So you'll notice where the pins are on the belt, and I'll just do an edit undo and redo my pins, holding shift to create one set of pins. I'll do either side of my belt. Pins just allow you to basically freeze a specific section of your garment or pattern piece. You can get the gizmo to move that section around with simulation on, and if you right click on the gizmo, you can delete that set of pins or all pins. So here I see that I just need to tuck the tail of my belt behind my belt loop. So I could use select mesh to select that bit of the belt and push it through. But the safest thing actually might be to select my belt loop and pull it out. When you have many layers with select mesh, it's always safest to select either the top layer or the innermost layer and push in towards the avatar or pull out so that you're not pushing and pulling into other layers. The last thing to mention with layering is collision thickness, which is called additional thickness collision in the property editor. So this IDES belt is actually set to 3, which is higher than the default, which is usually 2.5. So the reason for that is just from the looping and layering standpoint. So if you want to take it down to 2.5 and simulate, you can do a test and see how things move and how the layering stays intact. This should all be fine with this belt. When you put the garment in high res, the default will bring everything down to 1. If you find that you're having any collision issues with things like this, like a complicated looped detail at the waistband, you may decide you don't want to bring it all the way down to 1, and you'll just go into the property editor and bring it back up to 2 or 2.5 after you hit high res garment. You can see here my belt loops and waistband are already set to 1, which is what makes them look like they're sitting so close together like they would in real life. So as long as it's not causing you any collision issues, 1 is ideal, but you may need to adjust that. Essentially, the collision thickness is just an invisible buffer around the pattern pieces to help keep them from colliding.